All right, we're going to be connecting this today with another fun episode of Connect This. But Travis showed up to say hey and wish us good luck, and then went off to do his job, informing us that he was not wearing his hat, which is how we should know that he's doing real business that day. So I don't know, Kim, do you think it was more professional or less professional without the hat?
I feel like it was just Travis in his normal attire without a hat.
Yeah. Travis, we miss you, but we'll be moving ahead with our crew. Let's do some quick introductions. I'm Chris Mitchell at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, and we got Doug Dawson with CCG Consulting. Welcome.
Oh, hi. And I just wanted to make sure Heather understood the new intro that we have. We're serious now. We're stepping up the game here, just so you know.
It was awesome. I love
we have serious people here. Yeah, we have Jordan's producing this one. Rise on vacation, so we're gonna be. I would say raise your expectations and then prepare to lower them again. Kim, I already called you out once. Kim McKinley is with nobody right now. Freelance assassin temporarily. Welcome.
I am Kimberly McKinley, unemployed until Monday. So I'm excited to be here, Mr. Mitchell. So Rye, when he takes a vacation, he still doesn't talk about broadband, where when I'm unemployed, I still talk about broadband. Okay.
You know,
we
know sadness when we see it. We know sadness.
This is a golden opportunity, Kim. You should reverse yourself on every position that comes up, just to make it seem like you are a total shill for Utopia.
Right now, that's what's going to happen. Okay, moving on, Christopher.
We have Heather Mills joining us again with Tilson. Heather is principal consultant. Welcome to the show, Heather.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here. Happy to talk about some big stuff coming for grant and funding things in the future for broadband.
I'm a little bit worried. Heather does her homework and reads the official docs multiple times to become well aware of them. So I might be red-faced with some of the claims I'll be making when Heather says, actually, Chris, have you even read any words of this document? So, but we also have Lori Adams, who is also famous for that. Welcome back, Lori, from Nokia.
Hello. Great to be with you guys today. Glad I could jump on last minute here, fill a slot for you, and happy to chat with my friends in broadband about, nothing going on right now in the industry.
Okay, Chris. So you brought two people who knew what they were talking about on the show. How fair is this?
I think we can dumb them down. We've got three of us to bring the average down. So
okay.
Yeah. We are going to be talking about a variety of topics today. We're going to spend a significant amount of time in the second part of the show on BEAD and what's coming next, kind of with both a business as usual, what happens if it rolls out the way we thought it would, versus what are some things that might change under the new administration. But before then, we're going to start off talking about Maine and New Mexico putting money into Starlink to support the most remote people there. We're going to talk about the Supreme Court and not yet, Jordan. I'm doing a preview. We're going to be doing talking a little bit about the Supreme Court taking the USF decision, and I'm just sort of curious what we think the best and worst case scenarios are here, because the more I think about it, there's not a lot of great scenarios. We have a new study. We'll talk just briefly about it, but we wanted to laugh about just how bad this group was in this study, this ITIF study about how municipal networks are terrible. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the consultant apocalypse. If you listened to the show a year or two ago, we were talking about how we were concerned with the money coming into this. Reputable, good consultants would be overwhelmed, and we would see charlatans show up to steal the light and lead cities down ruinous paths. And we want to see, what we think about whether that's happened or not. But let's kick it off with Starlink. Starlink has officially been embraced by Maine and New Mexico. I know more about Maine. Someone else might be able to fill us in on New Mexico. But in Maine, they picked 4,000 locations that are the hardest to reach. And we're talking about really, really hard to reach. We're not talking about like, it's a cornfield in Iowa. We're talking like way out there, high cost to get to. And Maine is striking a deal with Starlink for minimum throughput type of stuff, and then subsidizing the cost of the terminals. But people will have to pay the ongoing costs. And I think this is a smart idea. This is what I said states should be doing. And I've been worried that states would put too much money into trying to bring terrestrial solutions to the highest cost people. So here we go. Tell me why I'm wrong. Anyone?
I'm going to agree with you. So I'm very aware of New Mexico, and there are places in New Mexico that are unbelievably remote. I mean, I did a study for a county where it was fairly reasonable to get to 95% of the people, and the rest of the people would have taken like $20 million to reach 100 people. I mean, if you built fiber or wireless, the wireless cost was almost just as bad. So those places have to be served with Starlink.
Yeah.
I think this was common sense from way back. What's amazing is that the FCC or NTIA just finally decided 5-6 months ago to actually let Starlink in the game. What were they going to do before that? I don't know.
So Heather, I look like you had a reaction too.
I think you're asking the wrong question.
I try to do that.
I know. I think you should be asking, why are they doing it? Because that paints a very different picture overall, especially given the fact that there's BEAD funding like right around the corner. So why would they do this? And keep in mind that, and Lori, keep me honest here in case I mess this up in the way that I say it, but even if they have satellite service by the time it gets to BEAD, those broadband serviceable locations are still BEAD eligible. Am I right with the fiber preference? So this is really sort of a backstop in my mind in how they're doing that. Lori, did I get that right?
I think so. I mean, it's a little unclear how those rules will work out, at the end of the day, because the mandate, the state has to reach all the unserved locations.
Right.
I believe, Lori, can you tell me if I'm wrong? And because I'm starting to stretch my brain out a little bit with the two of you actually bringing some real weapons to this fight. I think the state has to have a plan to reach everyone. The state doesn't have to reach everyone.
That might be, kind of splitting the atom a little bit there. I think, and Heather, who works more directly with the states than I do on the plans, I think they have to reach every single unserved location. I think that is a mandate, not a plan. I think they have to do it. But I'll tell you this, Chris, and here's why I am not fully endorsing of this Starlink strategy. Because in talking to the state broadband directors, they'll tell you absolutely there's locations that are what you just described, particularly in New Mexico, where the geographical challenges are just astronomical. The problem is that right now there's a number of folks where people are on the wait list for Starlink. Mm-hmm. They don't have the ability to bring them on as subscribers, and then also the monthly fee, even if you're subsidizing the cost of the technology and the terminals, the monthly fee is too high for a lot of these vulnerable populations that are in these hardest to reach areas. They can't afford $100 or $150 a month for Starlink.
That's right.
Yeah, but what's your solution if you can't reach them with the other technologies and they're too expensive? What do they do?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it is a real issue, right? It goes back to
it's absolutely a real issue.
This is why I'm not running for a broadband state manager anywhere.
No, Starlink prices are outrageous. I mean, they make Comcast look cheap. I mean,
let's be clear about this. Like, okay, first of all, a few pieces, like in some areas, these people are economically vulnerable. In some pieces, this is a house that is visited for a few weekends a year by a person that has 10 of these homes. And so like there is a mixture there. If you're out paying for Viasat or HughesNet right now, I think, first of all, why? You're probably locked into a contract. I'm sorry. But you should be moving over to Starlink anyway. But I guess this comes down to this question of, for me, are we going to get hung up on trying to get to 100%, or are we going to focus on 98% and worry about that other 2% once we've taken care of the much easier 98%?
I think I think this is a problem that, like, I know a little bit about Maine, but I've been to New Mexico, and yes, some of these places are homes for one time a year, but a lot of those people are rural, disadvantaged people. So like, I get it, but I think you have to focus on, at the end of the day, are you trying to connect people, or are you trying to provide economically the best solution? And I think somebody has to make that decision, because I don't think in some of those rural areas you can have both. At the end of the day, you just can't have both.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
if we're trying to connect people, I think it's worth remembering that connecting one $100,000 home with something would bring connections to hundreds of families in urban areas.
Yeah.
Now, I want to go back to something Heather said. When a state gives out money using state grant money, they're going to claim the authority to remove that from the BEAD list. They're not going to put it in again. And they're the ones who run the BEAD map. They're just going to say, we've solved it. They certainly do that when they give fiber out for states money. So right or wrong, they're not going to put that and keep those in the BEAD place. They just happen to use that money. The funny thing I dislike about this whole thing, I agree with Laura or anything else, these folks can already get Starlink. I mean, what's the big benefit here other than they might save $300, or it's now down to $250 for the
Well, I think,
unit.
and I don't know
Yeah.
if someone who reads this more closely, Heather or Lori, if you know, but there are hints that the state is getting a contract with Starlink, and I believe that will be such things as perhaps no waiting list and minimum guaranteed speeds, reliability, and other kinds of things, which does not mean they'll be in Gen Pop for Starlink.
Well, and that's kind of funny, and I've been doing too much talking here, but New Mexico is one of those places where the Starlink has the worst speeds. And so how are they going to do that? How are they going to guarantee it? Some of those places, and it's because of the mountains, some of those places you can't get the good speeds. And there's places where Starlink only delivers 10 megabits. They don't have the right altitude.
Lori, do you want to help wrap up this subtopic?
Yeah, can we ask a question at the end too? How many people think this is a good idea for the states to do it, and how many people don't? Because I think it's a great idea, even though I'm a fiber advocate. And
I think it's a good idea because the stupid mandate that you have to get to every single place. If you have to get to every single place, you don't have a choice.
I think we need to solve the problem of the affordability aspect.
Oh yeah,
So
of course.
That's
Yeah,
the
and that's-
point where I'm like
That's
reserved.
money. Yeah.
Lori, I agree with you, and that's ultimately where I think Carl Bodie and others really come back to over and over again. It's really important. I don't know how we even have that conversation absent another constellation or two. It's not. I don't think Starlink is making a killing at $120 a month right now. I don't have any sense of their economics, but I don't know how we do that, frankly, without putting a ton of subsidy into it. And at that point, I would do significant means testing.
I mean, you kind of
Here's something very interesting.
Hold on, let Lori finish.
You have to launch more satellite. I mean, you're going to need to put more junk up in the space in order to bring on more subscribers. I mean, that ultimately is a challenge.
Yeah, and I've already named my concerns on that. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, the city of Singapore now, not China. The city of Singapore has plans to launch 30,000 satellites worldwide, and they're going to compete. Now, are people going to view that as a Chinese product? It's going to be cheap. They're going to compete on price, I think. So, and for them, this is a major economic development thing, and they happen to have a very big space company in the city, so this is a good reason to do it. But there's going to be multiple satellites. It's that one's going to be one of the most interesting because it's Chinese, but it's not really Chinese.
So I want to move on. Some guy named Matt Rantanen in the chat room. I don't know. Sounds like a loser name. He says the last time that we just ignored the 2%, we left out a lot of the tribes. He's right. I do think that the federal government should continue to focus on programs that specifically work with tribes directly, rather than just considering them as part of the general. I think you're not supposed to my strategy should be let the Wookiee win, I believe, for those of you who know Matt. I think that we should not consider tribes to be just people in rural areas. I feel like there is obligation for a variety of reasons, including some legal, based on history and treaties that were signed, that there should be above average efforts to make sure the tribes are well connected. I have one last question. I just want to ask really quickly if anyone knows, why does Commissioner Carr, future chair of the FCC, why does he love satellites so much? I just took it for granted that he was someone who has bad opinions, and I never really questioned it. But in my email, I just got a question from someone asking, what is the deal? Like, why does he against fiber and for satellites? And I thought that was an interesting question. I don't know how to answer it.
No idea.
Yeah. I'm going to have to ask around about that. So Supreme Court is taking up the USF case. This is Universal Service Fund. We've talked about it before on several shows. The situation where the Fifth Circuit has said that the Universal Service Fund, as currently constructed, super unconstitutional and needs to be put down. And the Supreme Court has said, yes, we will hear that case, which means that we should have an opinion back in by June or the very part of July at the absolute latest. Most expectations is a really good piece by Steve Vladeck, looking at asking a number of legal and reading legal entrails, let's call it, to say that he thinks the Supreme Court will almost certainly keep USF based on this court's opinions on a variety of things, which just got me thinking, what is better? Is it better if we continue along with the Federal Communication Commission refusing to take responsibility under any party to fix USF, or would it be better if the USF just gets killed by the Supreme Court and Congress has to act on it because of just how destabilizing that would be for everything? So, quick shots on this, anyone?
I'll go first. I just wrote my annual predictions, and I went back and forth 6 times on this one about whether the courts would reject it or accept it, and nobody knows, obviously. So I came out to say the courts would reject it. I kind of think it's better to do it. That would finally force them to fix the funding. And so whether we like it or not, it would absolutely force them to fix the funding. And now if they put the same funding mechanism in and spread the base, they could call it a tax. You got to remember the Fifth Circuit said that the current fee is an abomination, and they were not wrong. It's really a direct, I mean, it used to be 15 cents on a bill. Now it's $2-3 on a darn.
But what is the impact of that? What is the impact long-term if they reject it? Does the USF get defunded right then? What happens?
I know.
They would have it within their power to say this decision will take effect on such and such a date in the future to give an opportunity for something to happen. Ted Cruz is now in a position of command and wants to make this an appropriations. Heather, what is that playing into your thoughts about this at all?
So a couple of thoughts there. First, I think, and I'm no legal specialist here, but I think procedurally there's a hitch to any of it getting turned over, because in the appeals court, they did not, when they filed their stuff, they didn't ask for any kind of relief. So I think that's part of the conversation that we'll hear, which should be really interesting. Like, who's really being harmed, in what way, and how are you making it better? Ted Cruz is playing politics. And when I was a grad student, we often asked ourselves, what's the definition of politics? I had a really nice little, what do we call that? A lecture on how you go buy groceries and beer in college with $10, and what kind of biases you've got to navigate in order to get what you need. And I think what everybody needs to do is calm down and remember that while we feel like there are no rules anymore, there's still processes in the background that have to be followed for any significant changes to a law. And a lot of those laws are the way that they are.
Is that right? I don't know.
I'm thinking my reference point is the BEAD program. You're talking about the USF program in general in that way. I don't know how it's going to go. I think I agree with Doug that it probably won't go anywhere, but that they will give direction specifically on what next steps need to be taken, because it's a problem. We've been trying to fix the problem, or talking about trying to fix the problem, for a really long time. And, of course, the bigger issue is if it goes away, think about how many people will be affected overall. When I started working in grant and funding strategies for broadband, I spent a lot of time with E-rate and working with that program for my clients in general. And it's not an easy process to become qualified to be an E-rate provider. And if you are a municipal network, it can be a little bit more daunting as well. And there's a whole bunch of other layers to it as well. We now have, if you think about this, if they did away with the USF, and we're also looking at possibly them doing away with the Department of Education. Like that was something in the background being talked about. Those triggers mean a whole lot of disarray. So we really need to understand like what that process would be. And that's why I say, like, I don't think that they're going to subvert a bunch of processes immediately. I think that they'll probably put a plan down. But Lori's
no, I'm saying you're bringing facts to the table, Heather. I don't know.
No, again, there are no goals. There are no goals.
And what I mean by that is, right, for 3 years we've been trying to get the additional funding for the rip and replace program. I mean, we've got networks out there that still have failing Chinese equipment in them that everyone agrees needs to be funded, and we need to have that. And as of right now, it's not there. Now it's in the NDAA that's going through Congress right now. So keep our fingers crossed that
National Defense Authorization process.
Yeah, so that it would keep our fingers crossed that this will be an issue in the past. But we spent 3 years. Everyone factually agrees that we've got to do this. It's something, and the funding mechanism has been the challenge. So I think I think you could see an issue where things get stalled because of the lack of progress in moving things forward for reform.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's going to be interesting to see. The fallout on this could be huge. I actually think the worst case scenario is that the Supreme Court would find some minor issue to send it back to the Fifth Circuit and say, do it again, because that would just give everyone an excuse to wait another year or 3 in order to punt it down the road. I believe the new USF contribution factor just came out and hit an all-time high. I haven't read up on that yet, but I saw headlines suggesting that for the next quarter.
I think the worst scenario is you hand it to Congress, because we may have one party in charge of everything, but I still think that the House is almost completely non-functional. And the problem is I don't think they would fix it. So
Heather?
It could be handed to them and fall on the floor. It could very well happen.
Yeah, I agree.
And I this is where Heather, I think one of the reasons I like having you and Lori on is because you really do understand how a lot of this stuff works. And I feel like Travis recently told me that people, which probably means 1 or 2 people, have told him that I think less crazy than they thought. And I'm not as wild. I'm a little bit more conservative than they expected. And the thing is, I'm a Chesterton fence guy. Like I'm the person that says you don't take down the fence until you know what it does. And I feel like nearly everyone in DC on the Republican side at this point is like, fences are dumb. And they're just ripping down everything and they have no idea what's going to come next. And I'm sitting here feeling more conservative by the minute.
But
think we all get
Travis has spent the last 4 years going. Travis has spent 4 years going, who's Chesterton? So you can't do that to him.
Heather?
I think the older we all get, the more conservative we tend to get, and that's just life experience. But it just depends on what you mean by you getting more conservative, Chris. I've listened to the pod for the last couple of months, and I agree. Some of the things you said are, to me, knowing you, rather shocking, but also very logical.
There's 2 listeners.
Yeah,
we have 2 listeners, guys. Congratulations.
Nobody blow up this call. I'm going to lose all my listeners.
Rather logical and somewhat rational, right? In how you got there in that thing. And I think that just comes with the experiences as the all of the things happen in all of our experiences. And we know what bad looks like. We know what good should look like. So.
I'm not even going to try this. ITIF. People know more of them than if I spelled out what the acronym was for, but they're a think tank, been around in DC for a long time. They're one of these groups that is often very pro-monopoly because very big monopolies give them money, and then they talk about how great those companies are. Kim, there's a new study that came out from ITIF about municipal broadband. What does it say?
It says municipal broadband is the greatest thing since sliced bread, but that's not what it says.
They're really anti-bread. These are very anti-bread people.
They think that muni broadband gets an advantage in the communities that they serve, and that it's unfair that they get some of these advantages. But reading the article, and having worked in a municipal broadband company for 14 years. I think this is just a perspective issue because I got less advantages from being municipal broadband than I did necessarily than people think, because it was so high profile that we could not have any competitive advantages. So working at Utopia, if I was in one of our cities and wanted to put up an ad, then we had to let the competitors put up an ad right beside it, right? We didn't get that, even though that the cities were on the hook for the debt if this thing didn't go successfully. So it's like they can say what they say, but they're not seeing it from both sides, right?
Well,
And
Kim,
that's marketing.
Utopia Fiber has 100% market penetration and take rate because you've used your commanding heights and control of the right-of-way to make sure that there's no rivals in the marketplace, right?
Oh, absolutely. That's exactly what Utopia has done. No, not at all.
Because you don't actually have any control over the right-of-way.
You don't have anything. You have to be like, even pole attachments in cities who have their own electrical power, we still have to pay pole attachments because we cannot be given any preferential treatment. So yes, they can say all the things they say, but a lot of these people have never lived on the other side, which if I was on the other side, I would probably say the exact same thing if I hadn't lived in the muni space for
if you were a big liar pants. Heather, how did you react to this?
So I found it interesting. I agree with Gigi Sohn's response generally, which was something along the lines of communities don't build broadband networks unless the private ISPs are giving them subpar service. That's not an understatement in my mind.
In your experience, you've worked with more than a few.
I've worked with more than a few, yeah. And I will tell you, the successful ones undertook a business plan process, a feasibility process. They went through a public RFP process. And what's more is there are some I want to say it sort of colored my perspective a little bit on, there's different types of partnerships out there. I use Scott County as a great example, Scott County, Kentucky. They were a recipient of one of the smaller BIP awards in 2021, 2022. And their partner, they went through a very public, rigorous RFI, RFP process to find them. They used CARES Act funding to help incentivize that. And then they went and they got a grant in order to reappropriate or reuse that funding elsewhere. When you see all that they got out of it, they did a fantastic job overall making that work. Now, the ISP owns the infrastructure, runs the infrastructure, but they make commitments to the county for things in certain ways. So I just find this to be a bit light. I think they did 20 different municipal broadband things across the country. Every state has different rules on how they have to play in there. So I think some of the conclusions that they came to, as Kimberly pointed out, are a bit sus, I think is the teenage term.
Okay.
They're not incorporating the difficulties that are there.
Let me offer one. They talked about how cities don't have to serve everyone. And then they said, for example, Ponca City, which is in Oklahoma, and we've talked a lot about it. I've talked to, I believe Dave Williams down there has done a great job setting that up. And they said, now Ponca goes ahead and serves every last person within city limits. But outside of the city limits, they pick and choose where they serve, which is an accusation that Ponca City has solved the problem for Ponca. And yes, it's universal there, but they have not connected Earth. Like, it's just ridiculous.
Is it,
Lori?
Go ahead.
I don't know what to say about that one. But I mean, this municipal broadband argument feels like it's so pre-pandemic. I mean, it's gone are the days where you have to provide some type of reason why you need to connect your citizens. I mean, I think you've still got 16 states that have restrictions on municipal broadband, and you look at those states and there's still a significant amount of activity around cities who have found partners, who have found creative ways to come up with a model that works. And, I think at this juncture where we are with BEAD, about to connect 6 million plus unserved households, And some of those awards will go to municipalities. I mean, I think, read the room.
Doug, did you have a thought or two about this?
Why I do. It's typical of these studies. They also pick and choose their facts. I mean, out of the 20, they only show a handful that are profitable. There's dozens who are very profitable. They didn't happen to pick up any of those. And a few of the ones they show as unprofitable, as like Kutztown, Pennsylvania, it's unprofitable. They know it's unprofitable. They're running it because without that, they wouldn't have the broadband. It's been unprofitable since day one, and they prop it up on purpose. That's a choice that a city can make, right? So there's nothing wrong with that. Yes.
Yeah. This is why statistics never work, right? You can pick and choose what doesn't look best in this thing to paint a picture, right? And the same thing can be done for them as well, that we can paint a picture of what they've done wrong. But it's just not a fair and unbiased article, in my opinion.
They said they said they used all the ones they could find the public reports on. They didn't try very hard because it's not hard to find out how much EPB is making in Chattanooga. They didn't try.
So I can say this since I no longer work at Team Utopia, but I mean, I had a very well-known person who's published anti-broadband articles write me at times and say, "Can I have your financial reports from 2000 to 2007 to 2009?" And I'm like, well, what do you want those financial reports? Because you're not looking at the whole picture. You're looking at a picture that wasn't a great time for Utopia, right? So, and I was like, those are public. I'm not going to give them to you so you can blast us publicly. But they never asked for 2023 when they were asking for them. They were asking for financial reports 10 years ago. They're not real.
We spent more time on this than we need to because it's fun. But the whole point of this is not that anyone reads it. I'm sure it was put together by some intern who didn't even know, by the way, that you can make these cities often look worse by including their debt costs. They didn't talk about that in their main charts. So you know that it's poorly done when they can't even come up with the best way to attack. The whole point of this is so that Ted Cruz and Brandon Carr can hold it up and say, look at this. These things are terrible ideas, and wave it around and know that no one's ever going to read it except for us. And Heather might read it twice.
I think Heather didn't even finish it. Even this disgusted her. Like, you only had to read the first paragraph to go, another piece of garbage. There's been 50 of these things over the years.
There has been. And to be clear, it was a research assistant for broadband policy that was the author of that. So I don't think we should be too hard on that person. They're just getting their legs. So
yeah. I want to ask about the what we considered to be a great fear. This is the last thing before we go into the BEAD discussion more fully. So we'll try and keep this pretty quick. But I'll start off with Doug on this one. Doug, we talked about how we thought that people like you would be overwhelmed, unable to take on new clients, and we would see cities not able to find good help. My sense is that most of the cities that needed to find help found it, and that there weren't as many cities and counties looking for help as we kind of hoped would recognize need help.
I have to be honest. I don't know where people go who don't work with me. I have no idea. I don't really pay attention to what other consultants are working on. I suspect that Heather's the same way. You know, the work you got's the work you got, right? So.
Certainly. Also, the question of have and have nots it comes up frequently when it comes to even, like, as you know, Doug, like grant preparation and such. Mm-hmm. And I think in the case of, and I know we're going to talk more about this in a minute, but in the case of BEAD, what role do cities and counties, would they be playing? And that's really in the challenge process and being a part of hopefully advising or helping to advise the state in the design of the program overall. But what I did see is that there were a number of localities that were not able to participate in the challenge process because they did not have the resources or the time to do so. And that would have been a really valuable help, because part of the reason that BEAD is structured the way that it is because the localities should know better what is needed and how to approach it for them than elsewhere.
Well, the vast majority did not participate. That's the shame. Yes.
Some states made it quite hard. And so I can understand why cities with scarce resources and, frankly, little to gain by adding, like a few locations here or there to the map, why they may have made that decision. Lori, how do you react to all this?
I mean, I see there's a consultant bandwidth issue. I think universally, it's not just at the city and county level. I mean, I got a call from someone who was like, "Oh my God, we just got pre-qualified for Louisiana, and we need help pulling our application together." And I'm like, "You literally have 2 weeks." So it's and they weren't working with a consultant, and that was a small ISP. So it's not just the city and county level where there seems to be a lack of support. It's kind of universal. You're either working with a consultant or you're not, and if you're not, you have a harder time finding one that you trust and can work with.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I've turned down a lot of people who want me to work for them. I mean, that's so and also I'm not naming any names. There are some very bad consultants in the U.S. So yes.
Yeah, there's been some that I think a lot of us have deep questions about. Kim, any thoughts on this?
No, I don't, but I do have a pillow for Doug. I don't know if it says this. I don't know if you know this, but I'm kind of a big deal.
I thought, Kim, you were going to say that you're available to consult for 3 or 4 more days.
I was going to ask her why she referred to Utopia as we a minute ago. So I'm just trying to get.
Okay, Doug, it's time to move on, Christopher.
Jordan, you want to hit the eject button there? Okay, we're going to talk about BEAD and what comes next. We have on, Heather has, I've turned to Heather many times to try to better understand some of the nuances in the rules, and Lori as well. Particularly, I feel like Lori is the specialist of BABA, the Buy American Brotherhood of America. I don't know.
Brotherhood of America. Okay.
Just I love acronyms, but Lori has really worked hard on that and actually has made a huge impact on that. So I'd like to start. I want to make sure we work the Buy America stuff in to have a sense of what we're thinking about that. But let's assume for right now that Elon Musk and the Department of Doggy does not significantly change NTIA, does not significantly change the structure, and that things move ahead in the way the program was designed. Heather, what are we looking at? Like, what's kind of coming down the pike next?
Post award. Yeah.
Post award. So awards go out.
Yeah. After we've gotten all the final proposals done, after they're approved. Now that could take a little minute, right? Because we're still working through final proposal guidance, and I would expect that they're going to try to streamline a few things in there. But honestly, post award, it is the biggest part of this. I don't know, Doug and Lori.
Does not seem possible.
What's that? Does that seem possible?
Does not seem possible.
Everyone is so hopped up about how long it's taking to get things done. And all I have to do is say, I told you so. When we talked in 2022, it was right around the time the NOFO came out. And everyone was upset about a 5-year plan plus an initial proposal. And my response was, this is the one time that we're doing this with our tax dollars. They want to get it right. It's going to take time. And they actually laid out a really comprehensive timeline that made sense. But I think what they didn't count on was the maps taking so long.
Thanks, Brendan Carr. Sorry, go ahead.
And then of course, I think that part of the timing, of course, is the staff that they have available to do the reviews overall as well. So if everything goes to plan, over the next year, final proposals will get approved. And then the states will finish up their pre-award process. That's everything up to a grant award agreement. And they'll start in on post-award. And my hope is that they're all thinking about post-award right now, that they all have thought very clearly about a grants management system and how they're going to do the intake of post-award required information. And my hope is also that the ISPs out there who are applying understand what it will take, because free money ain't free. This is probably going to require them regular. If the state has to report every 6 months, then you can expect that they're going to be checking in quarterly, if not more frequently, depending on the topic of things. There's any number of requirements within there, such as a cybersecurity plan and other things that the state will regularly need to follow up on. They're going to have to do regular risk assessments. They're going to be collecting Basically, any of the information that was required as part of the final proposal, I consider, and Doug, feel free to disagree with me, I consider the final proposal essentially what a baseline report is. It's your starting point for everything. That's why there's a budget involved there and all of that data that they're asking for. So everybody should expect that any data point they're being asking for right now, that they're going to ask for updates as we go along throughout the process. I could talk forever about this, so you need to steer if you want me to go somewhere else.
Well, let me give you an interesting take. There's two things I think that are going to shock ISPs. They are going to be handed a contract to sign, and it's actually going to follow all the BEAD rules. And their application did not follow all the BEAD rules, and they're going, "You really mean I have to do that?" And so it's going to be a big shock.
Can I clarify, Doug? Doug,
Yes.
you're saying that like an ISP is in conversations with the state and they're coming to a shared understanding of what they have to do. And then they're going to be presented with a contract that the federal government wants them to sign. And it's going to be, the state wants them to sign, but the federal government will be enforcing. I mean, so
this is purely between them and the state.
At the same time, this is where like, I thought where you're going with this is like, we've had work where we're a subcontractor, and I would say that the amount of flop sweat that comes from dealing with a contract that is like dealing with federal dollars is significantly more than one dealing with non-federal dollars.
But it's going to make them do their cybersecurity plan and all those things. Because the other half of my statement was the 50% of things that they faked in their application, they're now going to have to start trying to report real stuff. And they're going to go, "Oh my God, I don't really know how that works." These applications, believe me, there's a whole lot of fluff in them. And so once you win the award, it can't be fluff anymore. It's going to be a big shock to a lot of ISPs.
So have they agreement?
Interestingly, the big companies will have the worst time because they're going to have 20 different states with different ways of reporting. I can't even imagine what they're going to do.
So Chris, I agree. But let me characterize this for you a little bit more. Most states will have put up, if they haven't already done so, at least some template for review on their website. Now, whether or not applicants have actually started the process of having their legal team review that, I don't know. But it is not uncommon to see potential awardees get all the way to the contracting period. Their lawyers take a look at it and say, "We can't do this."
Right.
For interesting reasons. Maybe they're misinterpreting something like what the federal interest period actually means, and how that works. And we can get to that in a minute. But they'll reject the thing. They've spent probably hundreds of thousands of dollars applying for it, and they're going to reject it because they didn't look at the grant agreement soon enough.
I disagree with that, Heather. I do.
I guarantee you that's going to happen.
Well,
okay, Lori, go for it.
Here's the thing. People in the industry have been forced to sign government contracts for funding mechanisms, and they have just eaten the terms like RUS 395 contract. I mean, the Reconnect program, USDA programs, universally hates that contract. It's used everywhere. Everyone signs it. I mean, there's a lot of issues with the RUS 395, but I think that when you get to the point of winning an award, particularly for this, you're not going to let go of it. I don't think you're going to find many people reject it. Now, the requirements are going to be, I agree with you, Doug, absolutely. Are going to be a shock to some people. We've been talking to everybody, if you want to pull BABA into this, right? So there's a requirement that if for everything that has to be manufactured in the US, you as a subrecipient has to have a manufacturer certification letter for this. So I am authorized to sign this on behalf of Nokia. I have given out a half a dozen.
That doesn't seem like very many
for the whole country.
Yes. Because people, there's so many things they have to focus on for the application. They're going to come back to it after the fact. But you've got to collect that from everybody that has to manufacture something in compliance with BABA. There are 25 companies who have self-certified products for BABA on the NTIA website. So if you're buying fiber, you're buying electronics, you're buying construction materials, you have to have a certification letter from all of those manufacturers. So, I mean, we are recommending to customers, do this up front. There are distributors and aggregators that are collecting those on behalf of applicants. You just have to tap into that ecosystem. But there are a lot of people have given a lot of thought to this. But if you're doing it in a vacuum and you're trying to reinvent the wheel every time, it's gonna be difficult.
Yep.
So Heather, you want to double down and say that you think do you think when the lawyer says we can't do this, what is going to happen at that point for many of these? Let's assume we're talking not about Charter Spectrum, but more about like
The little guys.
a smaller
little
mid-sized
It's the
ISP.
little guys that are going to have a shock to the system. I agree with Lori, and I agree with Doug, or Doug agrees with me. It's the little guys who are going to have the biggest problem. I think if we want to go back to the point about the UCC1 or the government interest, people misinterpret what that means. They think it's a lien. Yes, it is a lien, but not in the way that they think it is. It's about maintaining the main purpose of that infrastructure and making sure that even if it's sold, it maintains that purpose. And so things like that add hitches to the process of review. And in most cases, the states will absolutely not negotiate on the terms of that contract because it's everything that's required by law in the law and for the state as well. And so, yeah, as somebody who's done a lot of government contracting, oftentimes it just gets signed. And then if there's things that need to be managed and worked out, that happens eventually.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, is there anything else, any post-BEAD stuff that anyone wants to talk about before we talk about post-Biden and what happens at NTIA? Heather, you have one other thing at least?
I have many other things. I could talk for hours about this. It is never too late to have a plan if you're an applicant and you want to apply. There are plenty of, at least I know my company does, consultants who help ISPs apply for these kinds of grants. And if you're looking for a consultant, make sure that you are asking them the right questions about how the process will proceed and that you're comfortable with that as an ISP. The states are chugging along. They've got a lot going on right now. And in most cases, they're looking for, I'm starting to see RFPs for grant management systems. And I don't know about you, but it feels a little bit late to be asking for that. And my only request is, please, if you're asking for support for a grant management system, don't ask for a solution to be proposed. I'm serious, demand that you are a part of that process. And here's why. You have many systems at the state that need to be incorporated into that grant management system. It's not something that you just leave to somebody proposing a thing. They need to be able to understand what the requirements are for all of those things. It's a complicated process and it needs to be done right. And you need to set up something that's going to be a legacy for future grant programs that the broadband office may be put in charge of as it relates to future expansion, maybe further out in rural areas as we grow, but also the affordability and opportunity side of things with the capacity grants, making sure that those people have the education and the tools that they need to access and take part in the digital economy.
Okay, let
I
me
have
ask
one more wrinkle to throw in here. I've been
Wrinkle.
classifying state broadband offices as 3 categories: competent, fairly decent, and they have no idea what the hell they're doing. And those last third of the states are going to have a really hard time because their ISPs are not even going to get help by the state office. They're going to have the worst time doing every one of these things she's mentioning. And all you have to do to look at that is look at the map challenge process. I mean, some of the states have gotten so lost there that they may never come out of the woods.
Doug, when you
and
say
so,
that,
and so there's a real problem there. Yeah. So.
Are those 3 categorizations of competent, doing okay and totally lost? Is that roughly a third of the states in each, or is there a different mixture?
Yeah, it roughly is a third. I mean, it's not too far off from that. Yeah, it might be.
Okay.
It might be 25% in the last category. There's still quite a few states that are really lost in the woods. So, yeah.
Kim, did I see you wanting to jump in?
No, you didn't, Chris, but I'm just listening to this and I'm like, this is why ISPs don't want to get into this. Let's be honest. I mean,
but here's my question then. Like, is the ISP dream, this could be very foolish, so you can laugh as hard as you would like for as long as you would like, Heather. But the sense in some states, I think, is like, you get the money out the door, you close down the shop, we get a person that receives reports, they stamp cool on it, and then they're done. And what's the big deal? So like, what's going to happen if they aren't, being super careful with the reporting and stuff like that?
that I'm going to call on Lori too. But let me just make sure that everyone understands first what goes into a little taste. When we pay someone with our tax dollars to build something, we need proof that it was built and that it works.
You don't look at the railroads, Heather. You're going to be very disappointed.
But it's important in this case. So every state's going to need to perform some kind of a field check. That takes time. In the Western states where you have much less density, that means that you may be engaging a couple of days or a couple of weeks worth of work to check on the completion of projects. And you're going to have to figure out how to do that around weather and any other disasters that may happen.
No, what if a state just doesn't do that?
Then
what if they say, people are online, they seem like they're happy, like there's nothing to worry about, like
they're not going to be able to fulfill their responsibilities and reporting up to the federal government. But Doug, you were going to say, sorry.
I was going to say some of them will not fulfill that, and they're going to hope by that point that the NTIA turns their head the other way is what they're going to hope for. So yes,
and that is a reasonable expectation based on history, I think. Go ahead, Kim.
I do too.
Let's go back. Let's go back to BIP and BTOP. There was not a lot of that done.
Yeah, that's where I'm drawn from, Kim. And then I want to see if Lori and Heather agree with our cynicism. Go ahead, Kim.
I was just going to say is that like the people who are making these rules, and I get what Heather's saying about reporting and making sure that tax dollars are spent effectively, don't understand sometimes that the margins at these ISPs are so slim, and to just hire somebody to do these things is just not reasonable. Like, you have people who are answering the phones who are also being texted sometimes. And there's like this multifaceted, you don't have a reporting person at all of these ISPs to make this happen.
But if you're applying for a grant, you can actually include that support as part of the grant thing. You just have to be detailed about it.
But how many of them are actually thinking that if they don't have the right consultant?
I think 100% of those who are working with Heather, 100% of those working with Heather are thinking about it. Lori, how are you reacting to all of this? And my sort of my very sincere belief that there will be, as Doug says, multiple states, perhaps many, that just say, hey, things are great.
Okay, so I mean, two thoughts. One is that a lot of this is going to be box check exercises for people, right? They're going to have to, things are going to be self-certified. They don't vet supply chains for Buy America. No one's doing that. So it's, incumbent on the manufacturer to self-certify. And if the applicant has a letter from their manufacturer, that's good enough, right? That's the box check exercise. The same thing's going to happen. Do you have a cybersecurity plan? Do you have a marketing plan? Do you have whatever it is? There's going to be, limited, there will be audits. You hear stories of all the time, at least on direct federal grants, direct from the federal government, IG audits, things like that, where someone's had like a 2-hour conversation with an IG auditor about the number of zip ties that are being left in the field because, they were concerned about how the quantity that was purchased and the utilization rate, right? So, the federal government's going to be getting reports from the states. The states are going to be getting reports from their providers. Now, in Louisiana, you're only talking about 20 different awards. It's not a massive number. It's not hundreds and hundreds of awards that they're going to have to manage. But I think, there will be largely a box check exercise. There will be audits. You will hear stories about people not complying with different terms and things like that. But it's just, I don't think it's going to be any different than any other funding program. Okay.
Hard turn. Lori, what is your reaction to a future in which Musk and Elon Musk and others do have their way, and there's talk about zeroing out BEAD, which I would say with Heather, I agree cannot be done legally. And the question in my mind is, so I'll just say, like, we just had a call recently about the second round of the tribal broadband connectivity program awards. They were supposed to be out before. NTIA blew away the deadlines, and no one went to jail on the first round. And so what if NTIA just decides that they're going to violate either the impoundment or the other complicated word rules, the federal, because just to be clear, the executive branch is required to either spend or not spend according to Congress's desire, and there are rules. So there should be consequences, but someone has to enforce those. And we might be at a point where this all breaks down. And I'm asking you, Lori, because you were very effective in making sure that we had a lot of capacity to build stuff in America, assuming that money would be spent on fiber and not
Correct.
rerouted to space or otherwise.
Exactly. No. So first level set. All the states, all of the money for BEAD has been legally obligated to the states and territories. It is the effect of sitting in their treasury, even though it's not technically sitting in their treasury. It is a legal designation. Evan Feinman this week in Mississippi was talking about this. It would require a massive lift to pull that money back. It's even harder to do that when you factor in the fact that Louisiana has legally obligated, provisionally to sub-awardees. You have 2 other states that are on the verge of completing their programs, and you have 13 states that have opened up a grant window. You've got multiple states that have posted pre-qualified list of applicants ranging from, 25 to 50 different providers and ISPs and consortiums who are pre-qualified to apply for BEAD. It is really hard to take something away from governors when you've given it to them in the first place, right? The governors, the state broadband offices are very invested in their plans and programs and implementing it on a fiber-first strategy, knowing they can utilize alternate technologies where they need to. I still think that is the most likely scenario. You talk to some of the state folks, and you talk to the state broadband offices, particularly in Republican states, which I've been doing, and they are committed to their plans and programs. They are talking to their governors. They are talking to their, senators and legislators about these potential, being pressured to give more money to satellite. But at the end of the day, the folks in these states that are unserved, the governors and the state broadband offices are hearing from them daily. We need service. When are you coming to me?
Mm-hmm.
In Indiana this summer, I was listening to the chairman of the finance committee for the Senate talk about how they're not going to be investing any state funds until BEAD is exhausted because they want to see how far BEAD gets. So I think.
It's one thing to have Ted Cruz popping off. That's his job, is to say ludicrous things, not follow up, and not ever pay a penalty for it. But Joni Ernst, senator from Iowa, is a little bit more serious, and it was fairly surprising to see her come out and be so bold.
Yeah, that was surprising. The reality is that the BEAD train is moving. I do think there are aspects of this, right, that have been highly criticized in the press, whether you agree or don't agree, the low cost option, some of the labor and wage requirement, some of the kind of the meat in the BEAD NOFO is subject to be changed. And that you can do without congressional action. That can be done, by the NTIA level. And I think, that is the most likely place to see change. But I do think that states should consider, state broadband offices should consider the unlikely scenario, play out the hypotheticals. What would happen if the governors is pressured to give the money to satellites? What is our response? If we are told to give the money back, what is our response, right? You need to have those conversations and be prepared for it. But I think they're on the lower end of the spectrum. And the U.S. manufacturing piece is huge. And there's a lot of people working behind the scenes on that aspect to be like, hey guys, we've got 25 companies that have made millions of dollars of investment in U.S. manufacturing of fiber-based products.
Right. Heather, can we get a little fewer facts and a little more wild-eyed yelling from your response?
We need some emotion here, yes.
No.
How do you react to my questions to Lori? Obviously, Lori, a lot of good answers and a real grounding of why it would be so hard to change. How do you react?
I agree. Lori and I are pretty well aligned there, actually. And there are certain aspects, and I think I said this earlier, I've had so many conversations about this in the last week that I apologize if I might slightly be repeating myself. I can't remember if I already said it. But I think that there's some reorganizing of requirements that'll make life a lot easier for states as they get to the post-award process. There was talk about asking for a waiver for the final proposal. Forget it. That's not going to happen. That's your baseline. But they might lighten up some of the requirements for reporting in order to get the final proposal filed. Initially, when we, like a billion years ago now, when we were looking at what that requirement would be, we thought it was going to be pretty simple. Like, here's a narrative about what we did. Here's the list of things. And now we have no less than 70 different data points that have to be included in that. And I understand why, and it all makes sense. It's just, if we're trying to be efficient in getting money out the door, why are we asking for some things now when ultimately not all of that information matters until post-award? So,
and Chris, one thing to watch for that we don't have time to discuss today, which is tariffs, because a significant amount of telecommunications products are made offshore and in countries that have been listed as being potentially subject to tariffs.
Wait,
Although
that's huge, though. Think about this.
It is
We've already
huge.
got
Yeah.
people going through the application process. They've made estimates based on what is the now, and if we get to next year and there's all these tariffs, that changes everything for those projects.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us are expecting tariffs not to be across the board willy-nilly, but to be very targeted based on who is effective at getting into the White House and pleasing our king. And so, there's a good possibility that we'll see exemptions for some of this stuff if there's a lot of reasons that he thinks he'd be getting negative publicity around raising the costs. I mean, I will note that we still have ISPs having to pay a 20% tax on these funds, thanks to the last time we put Republicans in charge of everything. So that has not been waived yet either, which is a significant issue, I think, and is, I just think really cynical for the federal government to do that. As we're running out of time, last thoughts on that, Doug?
Yes, I need to throw a few in here. First of all, I agreed. You can't stop this train because it takes an act of Congress to change these rules, and there's no way.
Maybe. I'm just going to keep saying
to truly stop it. Now, what they could do is put in a new head of the NTIA who simply slows everything down to hell and it just languishes forever. That would be dreadful, but that's not impossible. And so I don't know what that gains anybody, but the best outcome here is they really do jump in. The new head of NTIA relaxes all these rules, only makes that better for ISPs. Most of the things they want to relax have been on my list that I've hated since day one. Let's make it easier. The post-award could be a whole lot easier if we simplify the heck out of it. The bad part about that is if everybody knew about that 2 years ago, a whole lot more people would have applied for BEAD. That's the shame of it. So, it's a little late at the end. Now, the one thing they could do, again, there's some states who are way far behind, and it turns out to be some of the biggest ones. They could really pressure them to give a lot of money to satellite. So, the guys who are moving ahead are going to have their awards made. They're going to be good. But if you're the last 10 states who get your words out, NTIA may force you to do a whole lot of satellite. It's very possible. So,
Kim, were you jumping in?
I was just going to say that I get what Lori and I get what Heather's saying of legal stuff. And I hate to agree with Chris, but I think a lot of the BEAD money is going to go out, but I do think that there could be some kind of loophole that somebody finds to pull some of it back, because I don't think all of it's going to go out as it is today. But I'm not the smartest person on the call.
I just feel like people do not appreciate that we have Donald Trump coming to office, who has successfully pardoned people as payment, basically, for them committing crimes for him. And this would be a pretty minor crime compared to other things, well within Trump's ability to immediately pardon and things like that. The Supreme Court has shown no interest in dealing with any of this sort of stuff. And I just think there probably will not be. Let me just say that my prediction is so weak, I'm not willing to stand by it. But I will say I told you so if something crazy happens.
Listen, crazy is not out of the realm of possibility, but you've got to get through the governors to do it. And so that's
if they can give less money to California, they're going to pull it off. I mean, they're going to do some stuff if they can do it.
That's the sort of thing I do wonder about. Yeah.
There's going to be some weird ugliness, and it'll be random and odd, and we'll all sit there and shake our heads. And you know what? We'll be up to episode 120 when we're still talking.
Well, Doug,
about
you had said you think lawsuits. So
there could be a lot of lawsuits. Exactly. So
yeah.
There'll be a lot of lawsuits if they try to take money back from Louisiana. Louisiana will sue them instantly. They're not going to let them do that. Yeah. So.
We have a comment from one of our treasured readers or longtime listeners that I respect. I will say it's hard to tone down the political talk when this is all political stuff. This is all very political, and I don't want to sit here and pretend that like this is an administration like others. And it might turn out to be, and I could be wrong, and I'll be viewed as hysterical. But I do think there's a potential this will be significantly different.
You've never been wrong, Chris. You've never been wrong. All those chicken wing bets that you've lost, that was because.
And he's never been hysterical either. Never.
Yeah, either. So okay, keep going.
So with bead, I'm curious to see what happens. Like I would agree that I think the states that are in there, like Louisiana, the other states that can get their money quickly, I think they have the best shot to sort of move ahead predictably. With others, I'm very curious to see what will happen. So. I really appreciate you coming on. Heather, is there anything else that you wanted to get out before we draw it to a close?
Oh, there's so many things I could say. So maybe in the future we can come back when we in the new year and have a deeper conversation about the mechanics of what goes into post-award as well, to give people a good idea of just what that lift looks like in general. Mm-hmm. I feel like a lot of people think it's a black box at this moment, and there's a lot that can be done to ease worries about what that will take to get done.
Lori?
What's the next? Keep on keeping on, man. Just for the next seriously though, until January 20th, it's going to be go time for bead. If you're in one of those states with an open grant window, you've got to just go for it. Don't wait around.
Knowing you, Lori, I'm curious if let's just say in a hypothetical world that bead is just canceled. Once it is clear that it could not be brought back, how many U2 shows do you go to in a row?
Well, it depends if I have a job or not at that point. But no, yeah, exactly. Well, waiting for the next tour, probably 26. We'll see.
She put me on one of those once.
Oh yeah. So for people who aren't aware, Lori is a super fan and has had many wonderful experiences worth learning about different U2 shows and such. Probably not as big of a fan as Doug is of the Grateful Dead, but that's just because Lori needs like 100 more years to catch up.
She may be bigger, but not as long term. Yes.
What are you trying to say about how old Doug is? Like he needs 100 more years to catch up. Okay, Chris.
Hey, if Heather was here, I would have found some way to take a dig at her too. Heather Gold. So I really appreciate you all coming on. It was, it's interesting to me. Like I don't see these bead discussions happening, at this level in which we learn about the Buy Again Brotherhood of Buy American Brotherhood of America.
We're all about the facts here. We're all about the facts.
I very much appreciate the fact that you're willing to come on, have a good time, but also inform people. So thank you, Lori and Heather, for dropping by. Thank you, Kim and Doug, for being regulars. Travis, I hope that I'm assuming it was a banker meeting because you have nothing but banker meetings, it sounds like, when I talk to you, and I hope it went well. And for everyone else, thank you for joining us for another episode of Connect This.